We can welcome our US correspondent, Rich Reynolds, back to the studio.
Yabba dabba doo, here we go. Best day of the week.
Oh, aye, it certainly is. Okay, and plenty for us to talk about over the past 7 days in those United States, as you called them on the advert for this. Israel, first of all, accepting what's being known as a bridging proposal for a ceasefire deal. Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, has been busy. He looks like he might be getting somewhere, or is this just to pacify those that need to be pacified, perhaps?
You know, how many times have we talked about this? Mm-hmm. How many times have we said, hey, they're really close to a deal, they really should be doing something, and Blinken has said, we're really, really close, and whether they are or not, I don't really know. I just know that they have to get something done. 40,000 people dead. I mean, and it's not his fault. It's certainly not the U.S.'s fault, but clearly Netanyahu is dug in, and he wants the deal that he wants, but there are an awful lot of people. Was it over 100 people, 111 people are still being held captive, and clearly something's got to be done. But I don't know specifically what the deal points are. They're keeping them pretty much wrapped up, aren't they? The
exact detail, yes. I mean, overall, loosely, it would hold up a ceasefire and release the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. But at the moment, Hamas haven't even agreed or even responded to this. So, you know, and I'm quite sure what a bridging between what? What happens after that?
I don't know, but he got on a jet and he's heading to Qatar now, and then to where else? To Egypt, and I guess to talk to them and get their opinion. But he's talk about a guy that's hustling like crazy to get something done.
Well, it is in the interest of the Democratic administration to get this done before the election, certainly, isn't it?
Well, it's the thing we're going to talk about next. If the economy improves and we get inflation down, and the stock market continues to rise, and then the hostages are returned, there's a lot to talk about. But up until that, one can only hope.
Certainly as well. Yep. Of course, the situation of those hostages as well. You know, you can't really have people held for that amount of time. And as we know, some of them have died in recent days. Okay, let's look at what you just mentioned.
And you know, if you're Trump constantly saying,
no, he said he'd just let
put me in charge of this. I'm going to get this done in 5 minutes. They'll all be freed. Everything will be great. I'm not sure quite how he thinks everybody will be freed, but you know what has been, what is thought that he would do would be just to let Netanyahu do what he wants. Yeah, certainly he and Netanyahu have a lot better relationship than Netanyahu has with Joe Biden, who pushes back quite a bit, and Kamala really does push back on him. So we'll see what happens in the next few weeks.
We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. But the Federal Reserve, as you mentioned, are they going to be cutting rates as early as September? Everything looks like it's okay, isn't it? As steady as she goes.
Yeah, and the thing is that so to clarify to everybody who's not from the U.S. and the Federal Reserve, which is just called the Fed, is the chief financial institution in the country, and
the central bank, basically.
The central bank, and they set the rates for home loans, for auto loans, and that sort of thing. And those numbers have been incredibly high for the past 3 years, but inflation has been coming down. Inflation is now at under 3%, which still high, but really better than it's ever been in the past couple of years. So what happens now is if the Fed can drop rates even by a quarter of a point, which they've threatened to do for the past year, and they could have done it a few weeks ago, and they didn't. And what happened is
we had that bump, didn't we? That spike, rather.
That spike, and it happened right before we went on the air. And I remember saying, "Oh my God, everybody was losing so much money in the stock market." Well, the market has rebounded pretty much.
You weren't too sure how long it would take. I told you it wouldn't be too long.
No, it turns out it was about a week.
Yeah.
You know, and that's about it. But right now,
so you were poor for a week, basically, yeah.
That's right. So what happens if I'm poor all the time? So what happens if the Fed drops rates a quarter of a point, the market's going to suddenly take a huge spike up because of any time the market sees anything that's confident, anything that makes people feel good. It's a very reactive thing. When Kamala Harris receives the nomination, the market's going to spike again, even though it's not a surprise. So that and I can't think of anything because the current rate is around, I want to say 5.5%, ballpark, and dropping it down to like 5.25, and then drop it down in October and maybe November, a couple times before Christmas.
That has been spoken about, maybe 2 or 3 even times. And the reason it does matter is because that phrase, of course, if America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold financially, and it does affect the rest of the planet. So what about the makeup of the Federal Reserve then? Are they what are they? Are they made up of Democrats and Republicans, or are they just neutrals? Or
yeah, and the head of the Fed only answers to the president. The president is the only one who can replace the head of the Fed. So there's not the Fed does not answer to Congress or anything else. It's an independent body, and the members of the Fed are very closely guarded. I don't think everybody knows who comprise.
Really?
I can't tell you if it's 5 people, 6 people,
I didn't know
100
that.
people. Somebody out there might know.
Jerome Powell's the man, isn't he?
Jerome Powell is the man, and the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, she was the previous head of the Fed. So I look at it this way: we've got some pretty smart people involved, and I like the direction that things are heading. I like the fact that interest rates are coming down, inflation is getting a little bit lower. Things are I think heading in the right direction.
Beyonce, McKendrick Lamar, and Freedom. That is Kamala Harris's campaign song. I didn't think much of it at the beginning, but actually, then, as it carried on, we got the hook and we got the lyrics. Yeah, I think that works for her.
Got all her albums. Are they still called albums?
yeah,
I guess
LPs as well, if you like.
There you go.
So the Democratic convention underway, and we'll talk a little bit in a moment about how we weren't expecting to see her, but basically last night was meant to be all about Joe.
The way they work it out is that this time they had Joe last night. They had a bunch of lieutenant governors on and a couple of senators. And you got to remember, this all starts like 3 p.m.
Some pop stars waiting in the wings.
Pop stars waiting in the wings. That's right. They had, I don't know if anybody, this was written about much, but James Taylor was supposed to come on after Biden and sing a couple of tunes, and they bumped him. So, Mr. Fire and Rain, Mr. You've Got a Friend, adios, muchacho.
Well, that was because Biden went on for a bit too long.
He went on a little bit.
However,
he put him on at 10:30 at night.
He was back on form, though, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was on fire. He did a really nice job last night. And if you ever get a chance, go to YouTube or something like that and see if you can watch the whole speech. He was very, very forceful, very good. So. And tonight we have the Obamas. Both of them are speaking, and a bunch of other people. Again, a bunch of senators. The second gentleman, who is Kamala Harris's husband, he will be speaking tonight. Doug.
And quite a lot of endorsement coming through. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, tell me about her.
AOC is a congresswoman from the state of New York. I believe she's in her second term, might be her third, but it's second term. Very, very popular, very polarizing in Manhattan, but very young.
Chicago liked her.
In her late 20s. Chicago loved her, and it was a very fiery speech. I thought she was great. But as she is very polarizing, she's got some very definitive thoughts about things. And as you and I were talking off air, a former bartender. That's what she was doing before she got this job. She was tending bar in Manhattan and said, well, maybe I can do this. And she ran against a heavily favored incumbent, another Democrat, and ended up winning the seat a couple of years ago. So AOC's a real very powerful person, very powerful voice in the Congress.
And it seems to have been going well, hasn't it, really? The two Democratic nominees have been cleaning up around the country.
They all seem to be doing really well. The momentum seems to be having shifted toward the Democrats. Whether that's a honeymoon phase, whether that's just an additional shine on the apple because things are new and fresh and different, where Joe is not new and fresh and different. I don't really know for sure. We'll know in a couple of weeks. But right now the polls are all going in the right direction. Everything is up. Joe left right after the speech. He's not coming back. Mm-hmm. So he went back to Washington. So he will not be taking a victory lap with them. This is her convention now.
Well, why was she? Why did she show up yesterday? Because that's not normal, is it? I mean,
no.
The headlines were quite easy on her by calling it a surprise. but you said it's bad form.
This is just my opinion. I felt it was bad form for her to come out because she's going to have the spotlight on Thursday. It's all going to be about her. What happens on Tuesday, there's some more speeches tonight. On Wednesday, Tim Walz is going to speak, and his wife will come out and talk about how great he is. It's all very formulaic. Last night, Steve Kerr, the basketball coach of the Olympic basketball team, came out. Also was from Chicago. He was played there when I lived in Chicago for a number of years, and he's very, very popular there. And what happens on Thursday, that's when they take the vote. That's when they determine legally that she's going to be the nominee, and then she comes out, she gives a speech, her husband comes out, they wave to the crowd. But for her to show up when this is Joe's big moment, I don't know. You could have pulled him aside, you could have gone backstage and said, thank you, Mr. President, blah, blah, blah. I think she kind of stole the spotlight by walking out during his speech, but that's just me. Other people may say, "Hey, it's just a weird circumstance."
I thought it might have been prearranged because,
probably
it's not the normal
was
thing. But Hillary Clinton was about as well.
Hillary Clinton came out and gave a really, really good speech. However, this is my thought, and nobody else has shared this thought before, and I've shared it with my wife numerous times. And that thought is that if Hillary Clinton, who ran, in my estimation, a really crappy campaign in 2016, a really lazy campaign that didn't inspire anyone.
Well, and truly beaten by Trump then.
Truly. If she had run a great campaign, if she had been elected, there would be no more Trump. He would not have been elected. He would not have run in 2020. He certainly wouldn't be around in 2024. So for us to say, oh, Hillary, you're so wonderful, you're so great, what a great speech. And I'm saying, where were you in 2016 when we needed you? You ran this lazy campaign thinking that she was going to walk into the...
Oh, you think that's what it was? She just thought she was going to walk in.
I think she did, too.
She didn't really pull out a finger.
I think so. As a matter of fact, the last week, her husband had told her, you had better get to, and we know this for a fact, this is all written down, you had better get to Michigan, you better get to Wisconsin, right before Election Day. One last push, get out there. And she said, no, I'm good.
She wasn't.
You wasn't good, and you didn't carry either state.
Joe Biden said that the people demonstrating outside the Democratic National Convention, they were demonstrating, of course, because of the situation in Gaza. He said they've got a point.
Well, they thought there were going to be about could have been 40,000 people protesting. But he knows that he's been trying to solve this. He and Blinken have been trying to solve this problem for, 7 months now, or 8 months, and it hasn't gotten done. But for them, for people to protest, all the 40,000 people who have died, over 40,000 people, it's legitimate. And for him to turn around and say, we only back the Israelis because they're our ally, it would have been a little disingenuous because he himself has expressed concern for all these people who have died, who are displaced, who are hungry and thirsty. They don't have clothes on their back. So that's what he was saying, is that, I kind of get it, that these people are upset. Now, whether he's in the power to do anything, this is not the U.S. war. It's not the U.K.'s war. It's, at the end of the day.
Without the U.S., though, you'd have to think that perhaps it wouldn't be going the way that it is.
That's right. Well, everybody would agree with that. That's absolutely right.
I was trying to be diplomatic.
No, I know.
So, actually, you were saying they were expecting 20 to 40,000. Actually, in the end, only a few thousand people were there.
Yeah, and they were overall a couple people. I think they said 4 to 10 people got arrested. Quite different than 1968 when the city of Chicago was completely on fire at that convention. And
saw a few stories about that prior to the event.
Yeah, so that's what they were afraid of, and so they guarded against it. And matter of fact, the protesters didn't get any closer than about a mile from United Center. So we'll see what happens tonight. I think the protesters are going to stay out there. But overall, it seems like they were very well behaved. There were no rocks thrown and nobody hurt. And, a couple of people just wouldn't move on her. They broke through the barricades and they were taken off to jail. So
quite a decent bill tonight, though, isn't it? Really, if you think about it, Barack and Michelle, Doug Emhoff coming up on the bill for this evening. Do you stay up watching, or do you catch it in the morning?
No, I catch it on the reruns. I do. It's the middle of the night. I'm a political junkie, but I'm not going to stay up and do that. I am of nobody's no worth at all at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not staying up. I see it just as well. I get up at 7:30. I watch it on repeats, and I get the gist of it really quickly. So.
Also on the bill, Illinois governor. I don't know very much about the Illinois
J.B. Pritzker
governor. Yeah, but apparently a future presidential hopeful.
Yeah, J.B. Pritzker's governor of the state of Illinois. Where Chicago's based, of course, so they had to give him some time speaking. And he is very, very popular in the state of Illinois. He is a billionaire. He's a boy. I want to say he's from he's got Hyatt money from the Hyatt hotels. It might be Hilton. I think it's Hyatt, but he's got some hotel money behind him. But despite the fact he's very, very congenial, a really interesting guy, and he's been quite vocal because there's been a national issue in Illinois recently with the black woman who was fatally wounded after she called 911 last month, and he's calling for the resignation of the sheriff whose deputy wounded the black woman. So he's not one for standing in the shadows, is he? No, and we haven't talked about that story a whole lot, but that was very, very unfortunate for those people who don't know what we're talking about. A woman called the police because there was a disturbance at her house. Nobody was in the house. She was in the house alone. So the police came and knocked at the door, and she said, "Oh, I'm glad you're here." And, after a few seconds, they shot and killed her. And she was the one who called the police. So it was very, very, very unfortunate. Should never have happened, but you're right. He's been very outspoken about that. He's a very sympathetic person, and I think you could be hearing from him for a long time. Usually, I find that politicians who break in who are billionaires, and they have a lot of them run as Republicans, but they have. It's unusual for them to have this much empathy, So he's kind of an interesting guy.
And we haven't really mentioned him in too much detail so far today, but obviously we're not going to get away without mentioning Donald Trump. And he's, been up to a number of shenanigans recently. The counter-programming, as you called it, continues.
Yeah, he... excuse me, he was counseled by his people to just take the week off during this convention.
Lay low?
Yeah, lay low, because the Democrats were going to get all this attention. This was their time. And I don't think the Democrats did much during the Republican convention. They sort of took the week off and to kind of get their act together. But Trump is out there. He's in... Howell, Michigan today, and I don't know what part of the state Michigan. Michigan is a very big state where that is, and also in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So he's hitting some of those states that could go either way.
They're known as battleground states.
Battleground states, the purple states, as we call them. But he's been up to his old tricks, talking about the way people look and talking about how much better looking he is than Kamala Harris.
He's still going on about that. He hated that Life magazine cover. He's still talking about it. Still talking about it.
Talked about how beautiful she looks and how much she looks like Melania, which she doesn't. And one commentator said she looks like Melania if she were just another human person. Yes, they looked alike. But yeah, he's really bothered by that. And so the ways his handlers have told him, talk more about policy. If you talk about inflation, if you talk about the border and ways that you separate yourself from Democrats, you're going to be good. And then he launches up in the way she looked. She's not good looking. She's not smart. You may differ with somebody, but I think somebody who is a former prosecutor, was a lawyer, and is a senator and was an attorney general, they're pretty smart. You may not agree with them.
Well, of course, there have been headlines that accuse her of not being that smart, that go against that thought. So obviously he's trying to play to that. And as we know, where people only sit in their own internet or Facebook bubble, then they're like-minded people knowing like-minded stuff about what everybody else knows about, things like that.
Did you see any of the footage of him in the McDonald's and the
No.
Oh, so a lot of you out there may have seen it. What he did was he called a press conference one day, and he came out. I think this was at Mar-a-Lago. He comes out, and he had set up two giant tables filled with grocery items. Mm-hmm. And just talked about how things were more expensive than they were when he was president. And
there was a McDonald's story, wasn't there, the past week as well, about how much more expensive they are. So perhaps that's where they were coming from with that. But
a lot of this was, you know how milk used to cost this much, eggs used to cost this much, bread used to cost this much. And the laughing part that the press had was that we doubt that anybody doubts that he has ever shopped for milk or eggs.
Yeah.
And we know he's never been in the grocery store to buy any.
That's always the thing, isn't it? Ask a politician how much price a pint of milk is.
Well, they did that to George Bush Sr. when he was in office. They said, by the way, do you know how much milk costs? And he goes, I don't know, $10. And he goes, no, that's not what milk costs. So, but he was going on and on about Tic Tacs and about shrinkflation, which everybody knows about. Mm-hmm. And this is a container of Tic Tacs. This is
smaller. The Tic Tacs are smaller, or the container?
Exactly. The container. Then he said, "I've never heard of this before." So you've never heard of Tic Tacs?
He'd never heard of Tic Tacs.
That's what he said. So anyhow,
it kind of like then negates the whole reason for doing it. Doesn't
I don't exactly, but he's clearly looking for something to talk about. He's grasping at straws, and this past week it was the cost of things, which, by the way, is coming down. Things are still a little expensive, but
they need to capitalize on it while they can, perhaps. You know. And there has been some deep fakes around as well. One, Taylor Swift, the subject of that, and his mate Muskie and Kamala Harris.
Well, they know that there have been quite a few graphics turned out and put on X and put on Facebook and put on Instagram that are shots of Swifties for Trump. And Taylor Swift and her people came out and said, no, we don't endorse that. We don't think our people endorse Trump, and you need to stop doing this. And you know, using any sort of likeness of her to put on T-shirts, it's all a deep fake. It's all being created by the Trump campaign, and they admit it.
It's not illegal in the States to do that?
Well, yeah, I guess it.
We should just add it to the other lawsuits.
It might be. It's got to be illegal. I don't know if it is. I don't think. I think you're going to call the police and say, "Hey, people are putting my face on T-shirts."
Well, we've had this with songs, haven't we? Yeah. Where people don't want their songs associated with particular politicians, Trump included. And you would have thought that actually, you know, given the way that copyright generally is quite strong for music artists, that it shouldn't be too much of a problem to say cease and desist. Really.
Yeah, whether they do or not, who knows? But I guess if anybody has good lawyers, it's Taylor Swift. She and Beyonce have. Hopefully the two of them are going to show up at the convention. That's the rumor. That either one of them or both of them are going to show up at the convention for Joe. But in the meantime, Trump really believes that he's got the endorsement. He wants the endorsement of all the Swifties and all of Beyonce's listeners. And if he can get that, good luck to you. That ain't happening.
What about the Musk supporters as well after their bromance?
Oh my God! I don't know why anybody would want his support, but Trump loves him and Musk loves Trump. I don't want to fly in any of his rockets. I mean, I'm not going to buy a Tesla, and I'm certainly choosing not to go to space on any of his rockets.
Not right now.
No, at least not next week.
Okay. Another Republican front has been to accuse Joe Biden of impeachable conduct, but there's not very much evidence behind this story, is there?
Well, that's a story coming out of Congress that a lot of people are not paying attention to because it doesn't have much validity. That there are a handful of Republicans now that dislike Joe Biden so much that they're trying to come up with articles of impeachment saying that because of his relationship with his son and because his son got convicted and was had a problem with drugs, that they're saying that Joe Biden this reflects on him and that there's a good reason to believe that he should be impeached for the actions of his son. And it makes no sense. It's not getting any traction. They're always, it doesn't matter whether in the UK or Germany or Japan, There are always going to be those people who are conspiracy nuts who go out there and say, yeah, he needs to go. Well, you're not going to push him out 5 months before the end of his term, especially when he's been a very... I've said this before. I think he's a very good president, and he's been very, very strong, and he's certainly not a traitor.
And actually, this isn't the first time, because we've seen there's been a trait of this from the Republicans trying to impeach him for various different things, but they've all fallen short.
No, it hasn't gotten any traction. So I don't think there's much to talk about in this. I think this thing is just going to go away by itself in the next couple of weeks.
Meanwhile, J.D. Vance goes from strength to strength with some of his quotes, and he was speaking on Fox News.
What did he say?
He said, giving Kamala Harris control over inflation policy, it's like giving Jeffrey Epstein control over human trafficking policy. The American people are much smarter than that. They don't buy the idea that Kamala Harris represents a fresh start. Quote, unquote.
Well, I think you need to, when you're a politician and you're looking for votes, you need to invoke the name of Jeffrey Epstein and Adolf Hitler as much as you possibly can. People really like that. I don't know what this guy is smoking. I don't know what he's thinking to talk about stuff like this. I think he's just grasping at straws to try to find something to talk about, to get people talking about this. And this is a dog whistle. This is just red meat that you're throwing to the Fox audience. He would never have said this on CBS, NBC, ABC, BBC. He wouldn't have said any of this.
Shannon Bream didn't really shoot him down on it, did she, though? It's
no.
But he wouldn't expect that, I suppose.
No, she drinks the Kool-Aid.
We all know how things go there. Yeah. Right, I'm just going to have a quick check. Okay, we need there's a couple of things for us to wrap on here. Let's talk first of all then about the icon Phil Donahue, died at the age of 88. Perhaps not as well known in the UK.
I want to talk about this just for a second, only because I used to work. I've met Phil Donahue a number of times, and I certainly didn't get to know him well, but I worked for the same company that he did, and I joined the company in 1984, and his show was the biggest thing on daytime television.
So he was kind of the first person to deal with real big issues in daytime TV.
And this was back in the mid-60s.
Original Jeremy Kyle or something.
Exactly. Yeah. And he was the first one to ever take questions from the audience. So and he was doing things on incest and rape, and he was doing things on homelessness and mental illness and that sort of thing. Nobody ever dealt with that sort of stuff before. And he got to the point where if he didn't have much else to say, he would go into the audience. I remember he would say, there's a lot of wisdom out here. And he would go out with his microphone. And he was the very first one to ever do that. And God love him, the show ran for about 30 years. And Oprah paid tribute to him, talking about how, if it weren't for Pioneer. Donahue, it was one. In fact, it was because of Oprah that Donahue went off the air, because Oprah became so popular. She became so incredibly smart and so incredibly ubiquitous. She was literally everywhere, that Donahue, after a couple of years, just kind of folded his tent. He had been on the air for 30 years, so I mean, everybody has their expiration date, and his just came and went. Good guy, smart guy, great broadcaster. You're right, he was not a big thing outside of America, but those of you who are Americans who have watched him for years and years and years, he will be missed. And he was, as you said, 88 years old. Okay, just to wrap, then what would you do if somebody came up and tried to sell your house? Who had nothing to do with you, but just put your house on the market? Well, it would be a hunka burning low. A woman's been accused of trying to auction off Elvis Presley's former home, Graceland, and defraud the singer's family out of millions of dollars. How? I mean, what? Well, a woman claims that that the people who own Graceland tried to defraud her. And she turned around and says, well, I now own a piece of Graceland. I am part of Graceland, so I'm going to sell it. And it's all kind of a crazy story. Bonkers. $2.8 million it was on the market for. I thought it was pretty bit of snip, really. That's a good price. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
I'd
a
have
good
bought that.
price.
I
Yeah,
would have.
I'll do it.
Okay, but yeah, it's obviously not going ahead. This
so if
sale.
anybody tries to sell you Graceland, don't buy it.
Okay.
Elvis's ghost lives there, and you don't want to deal with
Well, I
that.
think Lisa Marie still has quite a lot more to say about
know.
it, really, to be honest. So which means we'll wrap
we're
with
going to
Paul
Graceland.
Simon. Oh, yes, we are. US correspondent Rich Reynolds with us every Tuesday. Thank you, buddy.
See you next week.